If you're watching this video right now, chances are you're curious whether or not I had any long-lasting side effects from psychedelics. And if that's the case, I'll make this video very quick for you. I absolutely did. But did any of those side effects include the ones that were listed on the screen before? No, I don't think I experienced a single one of those. I don't know really what I'm doing with the blinds here. This has nothing to do with the film, I'm just trying to make it extra dramatic. Yeah. I just quickly wanted to give a shout out to all my patrons because I've begun to dedicate more time to making these videos, and the fact that anyone likes this channel enough to donate something, I mean, it not only helps me out, but it genuinely brings a lot of motivation so that I can make these videos to the best quality I can. There's some links in the description if you want to help this channel out, but either way, I appreciate you watching this video and I hope you get something out of it. I got some really bad hay fever right now, so hopefully I'm going to be able to get through this without sneezing too much. I'm going to start off by explaining what I was like before I used psychedelics. I will then explain how I use psychedelics, and finally I'll explain what changes have lasted and what changes haven't lasted. So don't get me wrong, I don't think psychedelics only function to repair or heal people's mental health. You know, they throw you into your unconscious and reveal incredible insights and information which may not particularly pertain to what's going wrong in your life or where your headspace isn't quite where you want it to be. It can just be incredibly interesting information, and it can actually rewrite your philosophical understandings of reality. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to be just explaining how it did help with my mental health. So what was I like before using psychedelics? Well, I suffered a bit of depression that kind of developed majorly in year 8 all the way to year 12. It was at its worst in high school at year 12, and it was slowly getting worse by each year. I was prescribed antidepressants. I finally got myself an antidepressant in year 11, I think, and I don't remember there being really any successful results. I can't remember really having any particular shift in my consciousness until eventually I was prescribed something stronger than what they'd originally prescribed, and I was just zonked for hours. I remember having some homework that I wanted to do, and I was literally just sitting and staring at a wall for 2 hours. So I never tried that antidepressant again. When I finished high school, I kind of developed an avoidant personality where I just ran away from my emotions. I would just wake up and play video games, and that would be my entire day. I had quite a bit of social anxiety as well, and so the only friends that I was really hanging out with at the time, we were all kind of toxic to each other. They've all come to be awesome people, but back then, something just wasn't quite right. But I wasn't able to really develop any new friends or go into new friend groups because I had this quite intense social anxiety. The other issue was I had people who wanted to try and help me, but I was extremely arrogant and closed-minded. So whenever somebody would lend me advice, I would just think that I know better. I kind of justified the way I was because I was a nihilist. I thought that there was no good or evil, and therefore there was no good to strive toward, and so there was no reason for me not to just escape and sit around watching TV all day, basically. This is fucking ridiculously hot today, holy shit. Going from having the heater on to try and fucking cool this down. Alright. Okay. And I'm back. How did I use psychedelics? I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible because I did take a long time to really have a lot of trips and just absolutely go through a lot of trial and error to realize what method worked best for me. Basically, to summarize that process quickly, I would have a week where I was preparing for the trip. When I knew what day I was going to take whatever it was I wanted to trip on, let's say acid. I'd make sure I had like at least most of the day after that trip to recover and relax from my experience, which also worked as a period where I could, kind of reflect on my trip and integrate what I'd gone through. But for the actual day itself when I was tripping, if it was a nice day, I'd go for a walk, soak up the environment, and just kind of put myself into a really nice vibe as the psychedelic was coming up. And then I would, if I was at home, switch off all the lights and begin meditating. And I would if I was home, have a video camera close by so that I could meditate, and whenever I had an insight that I thought was worth remembering, I'd get up, try my best to translate what I'd seen to the camera, because not only was it just crazy whatever it was that I was seeing or the sort of psychedelic insight I was having, but also I was tripping pretty hard, so it was just kind of hard to articulate it as I wanted to. So sometimes these would be like psychedelic insights which really didn't have much to do with me or my identity and my mental health, but quite oftentimes it did have something to do with my mental health. Very often it did. And how I could be, improving in the way that I functioned and operated in sober reality. And so yeah, I would just go between meditation and video entries until I was kind of exhausted, and then I'd just relax in any way that I kind of want to do after that. That sounds pretty cold and calculated, but eventually that's just what I found to be the best method for me, and it still was quite enjoyable and definitely very, very interesting. But because I just wasn't able to trip as much eventually, and they are such long experiences, I had to try and squeeze as much info out of these trips as I could, try and get as much out of them as possible. So that's the method that I eventually discovered. Okay, so let's talk about what changes that occurred from tripping have stayed with me after a full year without using psychedelics. And obviously to discuss this, I need to talk about what changes kind of occurred in the first place. So I'll kind of do that briefly. So the first thing that psychedelics did for my mental health is they gave me more mental control. There's many reasons for this. One, psychedelics showed me that we have the choice in every moment to kind of either align with a negative reaction to what we're going through or a positive reaction. And it's also the fact that, the stakes are way higher on psychedelics. So if you do choose to align to negative thoughts, you're going to have a really bad time. And on the other end, if you choose to align with really positive thoughts, you're going to have a really good experience, a really fucking good experience. So I learned this quite quickly, and I definitely felt like I was assisted whilst on psychedelics to be able to align with the right thoughts. But luckily I was able to integrate that when I was sober as well. And so now I can even be going through, things way tougher than I'd ever been through before I'd used psychs, and I can still align to far better and more positive thoughts than I used to be able to. It used to be the case that I was just at the whim of my emotions or whatever was happening in my outside environment, and if something bad happened, I'd go down a spiral, basically. So that's definitely a big improvement that's lasted. So the next thing that psychedelics helped me with was lower my social anxiety, and they lowered my social anxiety in a severe way. Originally, as I was saying, I was kind of locked into a particular friend group, but because now I had a little bit more mental control, I was able to push my boundaries a little bit further, and get myself into new environments without freaking out, kind of thing. But there was definitely a lot of magic that happened behind the scenes, which I can't really explain. I don't know how psychedelics did a lot of the stuff that they did. Because I did have a lot of thoughts that kind of explained to me why a lot of my fears and, depressed symptoms and things like that just didn't make sense. And so I was able to integrate those thoughts, and that improved my well-being. But there was just a lot of stuff that happened on the side which I can't explain. And lowering my social anxiety was one of those things. They also managed to improve my openness, which made me far more receptive to, advice from other people. Obviously, psychedelics had humbled me, and I learned in a very small amount of time that there's way more to reality than I realized. And so my arrogance went out the window, and very quickly I saw that there was a lot to be learned from conversations with just strangers even. And so, yeah, I felt that this allowed my reality to become malleable again. That's what allowed it to be restructured in a far more positive headspace, because once reality became malleable and I was filling myself with positive thoughts, more mental control, and aligning myself with a better friend group, obviously my reality was restructured to become something way better. So the final changes that psychedelics enforced, which have lasted without using any psychedelics for over a year, is my anxiety and depression. I wouldn't just say have severely lowered, I would say have basically been removed. I don't think I've had a depressive episode since stopping using psychedelics. Early days of my psychedelic use, I was having quite a few days where I was just really sad. And I think that's because before using psychedelics, I was quite numb. And so in the process of me learning to engage with my emotions more, I had to process a lot of sadness. I think this is why we are numb, or a lot of us become numb, because we are stuffing away and hiding from really negative emotions. So for you to be able to experience joy and bliss at the levels you want to again, you have to first kind of take out the cork, experience all of that sadness, and then, yeah, all of that joy can, come back in full color. But yeah, after going through a period of experiencing, sad days and a lot of sadness and loneliness and things like that, I just eventually started implementing more mental control. And whenever I would be met with a negative circumstance, my mind just had the ability to accept the emotions, learn from those emotions, instead of resist them and run away from them, which I think is what we do when we have depression. And that just makes things so much worse. Because yeah, even in my bad trips, where my trips were full of, some negative and sad emotions, I would come out of it, if I had the right mentality, able to learn from those emotions, realizing that there was a reason I was experiencing that. So now these days, when I am in a down state, I don't just run away from those emotions or try and escape. I instead see why I'm experiencing this, try and learn from it as much as possible. And the fact that I'm doing that kind of wraps this acceptance over what I'm going through, which is obviously a lot more pleasant than resistance. There are some changes that psychedelics enforce which I haven't completely integrated. For instance, my stress levels are a little bit higher than they used to be before I tripped. And whilst tripping, my stress levels really lowered. But I think that's just because before tripping, and even whilst I was going through my psychedelic journey, I wasn't really acting on any goals or ambitions. And these days, I definitely react better to stress than I did before tripping. But I'm still in this journey and period of integration where I'm learning to remember that, I am the one who manifests my fears, and I am the one who gives the power to my fears, whilst also throwing myself into situations which are really new and challenging, and trying not to get caught up in that challenge and trying not to give in to the natural instinct of anxiety when I'm in those moments. So, at the same time, it's like my general stress levels are a little bit higher because I'm working harder, and that's something I want to improve, but I still handle stress better now thanks to psychedelics. And the other thing possibly worth mentioning is that whilst tripping, I used to experience like Trippy Pareidolia or psychedelic pareidolia. Basically, pareidolia is when you see faces in clouds and trees. I've talked about it on the channel before. But yeah, when I was using psychedelics, at least once a month, I would basically see very alien looking faces in the trees and the clouds. And that I always liked that because it was like this little reminder that one foot is still in this spiritual realm. And that gave me a little bit, I don't know, I kind of enjoyed that. And I don't get that anymore. That's one effect that has gone away. I do want to start an LSD microdose very soon. And it would be awesome if that effect came back because of it, but I'm not expecting it to, so we'll see. That's basically a summary of all the effects that psychedelics are motivated, which have lasted without the use of psychedelics for at least a period of 1 year. And I am very happy with those results. Especially when there's just so much propaganda that has been put forward against psychedelics. A lot of us psychedelic users are still trying to disprove, or you know what I mean? We're trying to convince people that all this shit is just propaganda, because most people you talk to who haven't tripped definitely think of psychedelics differently to those who have. But yeah, hopefully if we keep integrating these experiences and trusting these psychedelics and using them with respect, eventually the major social perspective will have a shift. It certainly seems to be going in that direction, which is awesome, but let's just hope it stays that way. Anyway guys, I hope you're all having an awesome day. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you got something out of it. Good karma to all of you people, and I'll see you all soon. Peace.